Carol Burnett is Hollywood royalty, a comedic genius whose influence on television and sketch comedy is unmatched. Her wit, timing, and bold performances have left an indelible mark on generations of performers. She has charmed millions, won countless awards, and built a reputation as one of the funniest and most beloved entertainers in history. Yet, behind the laughter and applause, there was one man who reportedly earned her ire more than anyone else in her career. This wasn't just a casual annoyance or a fleeting disagreement. Sources close to Carol have revealed that her disdain ran deep, and it wasn't just about professional rivalry, it was personal. The tension reportedly began years ago. In the high-pressure world of live television, where stakes were high, egos were bigger, and mistakes were magnified for millions of viewers. Despite his talents, this man rubbed Carol the wrong way in ways few others did. What made her reaction unusual wasn't just the fact that she disliked someone. It was how consistently and publicly she expressed it. She was famously diplomatic and generous with most colleagues, yet his presence seemed to ignite a rare, almost legendary frustration. In an industry built on appearances, camaraderie, and showmanship, Carol Burnett was usually a beacon of kindness. But this man pushed buttons she preferred to keep unpressured. Over the years, their encounters, both on and off camera, became the stuff of Hollywood lore stories whispered in corridors, recounted in interviews, and remembered by those who witnessed the tension firsthand. When Carol Burnett felt animosity, it wasn't subtle. It was palpable, unforgettable, and defined an unusual chapter in her storied career. This is the story of the man who Carol Burnett truly hated more than anyone, and why the animosity between them became legendary in Hollywood history. Carol Burnett's career spanned decades, and she was renowned not just for her comedic brilliance but for her generosity and kindness toward co-stars. Actors who worked with her often described her as warm, patient, and protective of her colleagues, especially those who were new to television. She could make anyone feel at ease on set, easing nerves with a joke, a friendly gesture, or a piece of invaluable advice. Yet, despite her patience and affable nature, there was one man in the entertainment world who tested her limits in ways no one else did. His name isn't frequently mentioned in public accounts, but insiders from The Carol Burnett Show and her later projects have shared that he stood out, always pushing boundaries, often self-absorbed, and consistently irritating to Carol's sensibilities. The tension reportedly began during the early 1970s, when live television was a mix of comedy, timing, and improvisation, all performed under the relentless pressure of cameras rolling in real time. Carol, a master of her craft, prided herself on professionalism and precision. But this man had a different approach. He was brash, unpredictable, and frequently disregarded cues, script details, and timing. While most of the cast respected her authority and rhythm, he seemed determined to challenge it at every turn. Carol's frustration grew as he repeatedly interrupted sketches, injected jokes that disrupted rehearsals, or acted as if rules of etiquette didn't apply to him. Unlike others, he refused to take subtle hints or corrections gracefully. He appeared oblivious or indifferent to the chaos he sometimes caused on set. Witnesses recall seeing Carol bite her lip in exasperation, eyes narrowing as she attempted to salvage scenes while keeping a professional front. The tension reached its peak during live tapings, where mistakes were impossible to edit out. Viewers might have seen laughter, ad-libs, and playful banter, but behind the camera, Carol reportedly seethed. Crew members recalled moments when she would pause mid-performance, eyes flashing, as she considered her next move, sometimes delivering lines with extra sharpness, subtly communicating her displeasure. Outside the studio, the relationship didn't improve. While Carol generally maintained cordial interactions with colleagues, he reportedly managed to provoke arguments, disagreements, and eye-rolling encounters off-camera. Friends described her as tolerant of almost everyone, yet with him, she displayed a rare and intense annoyance. Over time, she reportedly confided in close friends that he was the one person she had a consistent, personal antipathy toward, a sharp contrast to the admiration and affection she expressed toward nearly everyone else in her life. Despite the animosity, Carol's professionalism never faltered. She continued to produce brilliant sketches, manage her cast, and maintain the impeccable timing and energy that made her iconic. But the stories about this man and the way he could get under Carol's skin became the stuff of legend among those who worked with her. It was an unusual, striking dynamic, the world's most beloved comedian, famous for her warmth and humor, facing genuine irritation from one single individual whose actions tested her patience at every turn. It wasn't just about ego or career ambition. It was personal, and for Carol Burnett, that distinction made all the difference. By the mid-1970s, the tension between Carol Burnett and the man she reportedly disliked had reached levels that co-stars and crew members described as almost cinematic in intensity. On paper, they were simply colleagues working in a high-pressure environment, but behind the cameras, their dynamic became a quiet battle of wills, one that added layers of friction to the famously precise and polished world of the Carol Burnett Show. At first, the clashes were small, a forgotten cue here, an improvisation that didn't land there, an off-script comment that undercut a carefully planned sketch. Carol, known for her patience, initially handled the incidents with humor, a gentle nudge, or a private word of advice. But over time, the man's behavior escalated. He seemed oblivious or perhaps indifferent to the impact he had on the cast, the crew, and the pacing of sketches. He pushed boundaries deliberately, testing Carol's famously generous temperament in ways that no one else dared. One of the most notorious incidents occurred during a live taping of a sketch, where timing was critical. The scene required perfect choreography. Carol had to enter, deliver a precise line, and move seamlessly to another actor. But he decided to ad-lib, inserting an unplanned joke that caused Carol to stumble on her line. Laughter came from the audience, but it wasn't joy, it was confusion. Carol had to recover instantly, improvising a witty retort while masking her irritation. Behind the cameras, her crew noted her eyes flashing and her jaw tightening, the rare and unmistakable signs of genuine anger. It wasn't performance, it was frustration. In private, Carol expressed her annoyance more candidly. Close friends recalled that she would vent about him extensively, how his antics disrupted rehearsals, made her co-stars uncomfortable, and undermined the precision she worked so hard to maintain. For someone who prided herself on discipline and comedic timing, his unpredictability felt like an affront, not just professionally but personally. "He's the one person who truly gets under my skin," she reportedly confided to trusted colleagues, a rare admission from someone usually so forgiving. The friction wasn't limited to the stage. Off camera, he often questioned her decisions, challenged her authority subtly, or inserted himself into situations where he didn't belong. Where most colleagues respected her leadership, he questioned it. Where most treated her as the consummate professional she was, he tested the boundaries of her patience. It became a cycle. Tension on stage led to tension off stage, and vice versa. Despite this, Carol never let the conflict affect her professionalism. She delivered flawless performances, maintained impeccable timing, and continued to support her fellow actors. But for those who knew her well, the animosity was unmistakable. It became part of the lore of the show, the story whispered in hallways, remembered by crew members, and recounted in interviews long after the man himself faded from the spotlight. Interestingly, their clashes also brought out a unique dynamic. In some ways, he pushed Carol to defend her comedic instincts and refine her craft. Every time she overcame one of his disruptions, she honed her timing, her wit, and her resilience. And yet, there was no denying the cost: stress, frustration, and an ongoing sense of unease that she rarely experienced with anyone else. By the end of the decade, their interactions had settled into a tense but manageable routine, mutual awareness of boundaries, moments of civility, and unspoken acknowledgement of past battles. But for Carol Burnett, he remained the singular figure she truly disliked more than anyone in her storied career, a testament to both her patience and the remarkable ability of one individual to test it. Their story became a legend in Hollywood, a reminder that even in an industry built on laughter, showmanship, and camaraderie, tensions simmered behind the scenes, and even the most beloved performers were human. By the late 1970s, the tension between Carol Burnett and the man she disliked had escalated to a level that was impossible to ignore. The routine interruptions, unplanned ad-libs, and challenges to her authority had worn on her patience for years. While Carol was known for her grace, humor, and professionalism, there came a point when subtle irritation could no longer contain the magnitude of her frustration. That point arrived during the taping of a special live segment intended to celebrate the show's success, a segment that required meticulous timing, precise choreography, and, most importantly, unity among the cast. The sketch began like any other. Carol entered the stage, radiant and composed, delivering her first line flawlessly. The audience laughed at her witty opening, and everything seemed to be going according to plan. But then he made his move, stepping in at an unplanned moment, injecting a line that disrupted the carefully orchestrated rhythm. The cameras caught the slip, the audience chuckled nervously, but backstage, chaos was brewing. The crew whispered, and Carol's eyes narrowed as she processed the disruption in real time. This wasn't the first time he had undermined her on set, but Carol was determined not to let it happen again. After the sketch concluded, instead of retreating to her dressing room, she walked directly to him. Her steps were deliberate, her posture firm, a combination of authority and righteous anger. Colleagues later described the confrontation as unforgettable, a clash of wills that had been building over years finally erupting in one intense moment. Do you realize how many times you've ruined timing, disrupted sketches, and put everyone on edge? Carol asked, her voice calm but laced with steel. This isn't a game. It's a show that people love, and it takes all of us working together to make it succeed. Your antics are unacceptable. The man tried to deflect, smirked, and made a comment attempting to downplay the situation. But Carol wasn't backing down. She reminded him of the countless rehearsals, disrupted, the frustration of the crew, and the meticulous effort that went into every single episode. Her words weren't meant to humiliate him, but to set an undeniable boundary, a line that, until now, had never been explicitly drawn. For a few tense moments, the room was silent. The air crackled with intensity. Colleagues later recalled that it felt as though the entire energy of the studio had shifted. Carol's authority, built over years of excellence and respect, dominated the space. And in that moment, it became clear she would tolerate no further disruption, no further disrespect, and no further tests of patience. The confrontation didn't result in a dramatic public fallout. He remained on the show for some time, but their interactions were markedly different. Where once there had been tension bubbling under the surface, now there was a cautious distance, a mutual acknowledgement of boundaries. Carol Burnett, ever the consummate professional, never let the incident affect her work on camera. She continued to shine, her comedic timing sharper, her performances impeccable, and her presence commanding. Behind the scenes, the story became legend. Crew members would recall the confrontation as a defining moment not only for that individual, but for the culture of the show itself. It was proof that even in a world of laughter, comedy, and improvisation, professionalism and respect were non-negotiable. For Carol Burnett, the confrontation reinforced a truth she had always known. Talent alone does not excuse behavior that disrupts collaboration, respect, or the integrity of the work. And for that man, it became the unmistakable lesson that even the brightest star of comedy had limits, and crossing them was not an option. Years passed, and the Carol Burnett show eventually came to an end, leaving behind a legacy of laughter, creativity, and groundbreaking comedy. Carol Burnett herself continued to shine, appearing on stage, television, and film, inspiring countless performers along the way. Yet, even as her career flourished, the memory of that one individual, the man she reportedly hated more than anyone, remained a defining story behind the scenes, a reminder of both the pressures of live television and the limits of tolerance. Colleagues often reflected on the unique dynamic between Carol and him. While many of the cast and crew shared warm memories, the friction she experienced stood out. Unlike typical disagreements or rivalries that faded over time, the tension between them was persistent and personal. It was an unusual phenomenon in an industry that thrives on ego clashes, creative differences, and high-pressure environments. Carol Burnett, known for her generosity and charm, had rarely shown such intensity toward any other individual. Yet, in hindsight, those moments also highlighted her integrity and unwavering standards. What made her dislike so memorable wasn't just the behavior of the man. But the impact it had on her craft, Carol was a perfectionist not in an arrogant sense, but because she genuinely cared about the quality of the work, the experience of her colleagues, and the laughter of her audience. Every disruption, every challenge, and every slight deviation from plan was magnified in her mind. Not because she sought control, but because she felt responsible. She had built a show on trust, timing, and camaraderie, and anything that threatened. That balance naturally provoked her strongest reactions. In later interviews, Carol never directly named him, but she occasionally alluded to the lessons learned. From navigating difficult personalities in her career, she emphasized professionalism, patience, and the importance of maintaining boundaries, demonstrating that even when faced with persistent challenges, one could rise above them without compromising their principles. Her colleagues noted that the confrontation and subsequent tension shaped her approach to leadership, rehearsal, and collaboration, reinforcing her reputation as both a brilliant performer and a formidable authority behind the scenes. Interestingly, the story became part of Hollywood lore. Writers, comedians, and insiders shared tales of the man who managed to provoke Carol Burnett, a woman famed for her kindness and humor, to openly display genuine irritation. These anecdotes weren't meant to shame him, but to underscore the rare intensity of her reaction and the extraordinary professionalism required to sustain a show of such magnitude. It served as a cautionary tale for performers and collaborators. Talent and charisma do not excuse behavior that undermines teamwork, respect, or the integrity of the craft. For Carol Burnett, the legacy of this relationship was twofold. On one hand, it was a chapter of challenge, tension, and personal frustration. On the other, it became a testament to her ability to navigate difficult situations with strength, wit, and grace, ultimately preserving the quality and spirit of her work. Even decades later, colleagues and historians remark on her steadfastness, noting that while she laughed with almost everyone, she had the courage to stand firm when boundaries were crossed. In the end, the man who provoked Carol Burnett became more than a source of irritation. He was an unlikely catalyst that highlighted the depth of her professionalism, the precision of her craft, and the uncompromising standards that made her an icon. Her story reminds us that even in the world of comedy, where laughter reigns supreme, personal integrity, boundaries, and respect are non-negotiable. And so, behind the laughter and applause, the tension endured, an indelible footnote in the extraordinary career of a woman who, for decades, entertained millions while never compromising on what mattered most.